Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are back again with 5 Minute Football. Today, we are talking with Tyler Nohe from the Always Talkin Ball podcast. We're going to go over some of the top storylines in the American Athletic Conference. Certainly, a lot of people believe that it is maybe the best of the G5 conferences. That and the Sun Belt kind of go back and forth for top honors on that. So before we let's just get right into it. Tyler, what do you think is does Memphis have the credentials? I know that they're being talked about with Boise State and maybe with Texas State and maybe a few other teams as maybe the most likely auto bid from the G5. Do you think that Memphis has the credentials to kind of achieve that?
I think Memphis definitely has the credentials. They definitely have the firepower. It all starts with quarterback Seth Hennigan. I think along with Caden Salter of Liberty, they're probably the best quarterbacks in the group of five. He's one of the only five players in the group of five to even have Heisman odds listed for him. So that kind of tells you what the national media thinks about him. He threw for nearly 3,900 yards last year to go along with 32 touchdowns, 5 more on the ground. He's got his top 2 targets back. Rock Taylor, 69 catches, over 1,000 yards last year. Demir Blankenship had 56 catches along in that as well. Ryan Silverfield did his best to bring in a lot of talent. They brought in, the top transfer portal class in the group of 5. They got Mario Anderson, South Carolina's top running back, to come in. So that's big, 124 career starts on the offensive line. So the offense is no problem there. The defense, again, is going to be a concern. I think ranked 92nd in scoring defense last year. They gave up 268 yards passing per game, which was 121st in the country. They're doing their best too. They're adding, Tennessee's leading tackle, Elijah Herring, to try to bolster the middle of that defense. But where it comes into me is the schedule for Memphis. Fortunately for them, they're 29-6 at home since 2017. That helps because they've got a non-conference home matchup with Troy. Unfortunately for them, they go on the road to Florida State, to USF, to UTSA, and Tulane. They got the 3rd toughest conference schedule. And in my mind, it puts them behind the 8 ball, even in the conference, when compared to UTSA and Tulane.
Yeah, and that's the one reason, the schedule was the one reason that I actually have Boise State as my representative over Memphis. But Memphis is more than talented enough. And like you said, with Hennigan and some of the weapons he has, would I be shocked if Memphis was a representative? Not at all. I worry about some of the road landmines that Memphis has. The top dog for a while has been Tulane, and Willie Fritz moved on to Houston. I think a lot of people are happy for him because they said he deserved to be at a Power 5 power program, and now he's getting his chance. So in comes Jon Sumrall, who has been very good in the Sun Belt at the aforementioned Troy, as we talked about. Do you think that this is pretty much someone who can just hit the ground running? He's familiar with Tulane. He's been there before. He knows what to expect. Do you think that it's realistic to not really expect much of a drop-off from the Green Wave?
Yeah, like you mentioned, Sumrall, he comes from Troy, 23-4 over the last 2 seasons at Troy. The good thing they have going for them is on the defensive side of the ball, Troy was the best in the Sun Belt last year, and they ran nearly identical schemes to what Tulane does. So everybody coming back in that system, there's not going to be much change. And they return guys on the defense like Patrick Jenkins, like Jesus Machado, like Tyler Grubbs. On the offensive side of the ball, you've got Ty Thompson coming in from Oregon, and you've got Mario Williams coming in from USC. Think about it. In 2021, Ty Thompson was the 9th rated quarterback ahead of guys like Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe. Mario Williams was ranked 15th. He was ahead of guys like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. And so that just shows you the talent that those guys have. Now, recruiting rankings can get it wrong sometimes, but sometimes you just need to get into the right system. But let's not forget about quarterback Kai Horton. He stepped in from Michael Pratt multiple times last year, especially in that Ole Miss game where the Green Wave led the Rebels by 7 at halftime. So I think it's going to be a battle between him and Thompson for quarterback this fall. Luckily for both of them, they've got the safety valve in the backfield and Mekhi Hughes. He ran for nearly 1,400 yards last season. Again, Mario Williams coming over is going to help the loss of Chris Brazzell to Tennessee. And again, second easiest conference schedule. We're kind of entering the era of unbalanced schedules with no divisions anymore. And the American's been working for that for a couple of years already. But Tulane also has the 10th toughest schedule out of all G5 teams because they play Kansas State at home and Oklahoma on the road back-to-back in weeks 2 and 3. So it's going to be tough sledding for them at the beginning of the year. But again, I think they'll hit the ground running once conference play comes around.
Yeah, Mekhi Hughes is one of my favorite of the G5 backs. I like him. Nate Noel, who has since moved on to Missouri. Um, Guys like that, Jalen White in the Sun Belt. So,
Yep.
but yeah, Hughes was kind of a revelation last year, and I think that he's a big reason that Tulane probably will not drop off. Speaking of drop offs, you've got UTSA. Frank Harris, one of my all-time favorites, was there 12 years? It seemed like.
Yeah.
Now they need to kind of move on from him. I know that Jeff Traylor has created a pretty solid program at UTSA, so they're not going to backslide a lot. But do you think that the loss of Harris is just enough to maybe take them out of being maybe just a tier below Memphis and Tulane, where they may have to, I guess, kind of they can't just rely on the grizzled veteran?
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't. I think, we talk a lot on our podcast about, kind of the gambling angle of things. And UTSA to win the conference at 5-1 is one of my favorite bets. I mean, we get used to saying this every year, but is this going to be Jeff Traylor's last season in San Antonio? I mean, he's 39-14 overall. He's 27-4 in conference play, in a couple different conferences there. They get tough non-conference road games against Texas State and Texas. Some are wondering if that showdown on September 7th at Texas State could determine a playoff spot later in the year. They get Memphis at home, and they don't play Tulane or USF in the conference play, so they get the fourth easiest conference schedule. They're going to have Owen McCown, kind of a pocket passer, or Eddie Lee Marburger, kind of the dual threat type. They're going to fill the big shoes of Frank Harris, but they returned 7 starters on offense. They got all 4 offensive line coming back. They got 6 starters on defense. One name to watch out for is Jamori Robinson. I think he is a solid candidate to replace edge rusher Trey Moore, who obviously transferred off to Texas. So I like UTSA to at least make the American Conference Championship game this year.
Yeah, and I really like their rushing attack with Henry and Kavorian Barnes. That's one of the better 1-2 punches in all of college football. I think I had them listed. I was trying to last week. I put up some running back tandems. I can't remember if I put them up, but if I didn't, then it was an oversight because those two are really, really good. So we've talked about the 3 teams that are projected to be the favorites. Let's throw USF in there too, just because I think a lot of people think they have some upside with Byron Brown. Beyond those 4, though, who's maybe a team that can upset the apple cart, kind of a team that no one's talking about, that you wouldn't be completely shocked if they were in the conference championship game?
Yeah, USF, I think, is kind of that clear-cut 4th team right now, just maybe right on the cusp of the top 3. So I wouldn't really, throw them in as kind of a sleeper pick to win the conference. And I see you got your East Carolina hat on there. I think a rebound is likely after finishing 2-10 last year. I mean, they had 4 one-score losses. They get the easiest schedule in the conference this year. They don't get to play Memphis, Tulane, or USF, and they get UTSA at home. I think the defense is going to be improved. Offense is going to need to improve a ton if they're going to get back to a bowl game, which I do think that they can. You'll recognize names at East Carolina, at quarterback, like former Miami and Mizzou quarterback Jake Garcia, former Michigan State quarterback Caden Hauser. They're going to battle it out at camp. You got another guy, the team down there, and Tom Herman and FAU, but they've got massive turnover. I mean, they rank 121st in the country in returning production. But they get the easiest overall schedule in the conference. They got to play FIU, UConn, and Wagner out of conference. They get a rebuilding Michigan State team week 1. Maybe they can catch them off guard. But I'm actually going to go with the Rice Owls. I think they are a sleeper team. I think it's going to be Mike Bloomgren's best roster. Last year, they went 0-6 against teams that finished in the top 85 of SP+. And obviously, they went 6-1, and teams below that. I think they're going to get a couple of wins against better teams this year. EJ Warner, the son of Kurt Warner, is coming over from Temple. He's Temple's all-time leading passer. He's going to lead the offense. The defense is going to be much improved. The key fact here is They were minus 14 in turnover margin last season, which was third worst in the country. And usually when you see that, it's just bound to improve and your fortunes are bound to turn over the next season. The downfall for Rice is they've got the toughest conference schedule. They face all 4 top contenders with Tulane and Memphis coming on the road. But again, that means, they've got a chance to upset the apple cart, and playing all 4 of those teams give them a chance to win those games.
Yeah, and they actually have at least one guy at each level on defense that can maybe cause some problems. I really like Sean Fresh. He's obviously a returner, and being a pretty solid last line of defense there back in the secondary. He's a guy that I really like. I may be out on an island. I actually think North Texas might be able to make some noise too with Eric Morris. I know their offense has usually been pretty high tempo. The defense has been a little bit of a problem, but they work the portal as well, and I think they have some guys. But I will not go against Rice or East Carolina. East Carolina also had to deal with a lot of injuries last year, and so like injuries are cyclical, like you talked about with Rice with the turnovers. If you're minus 14 one year, you might be plus 7 this year.
Right.
And that might be the difference between 2 or 3 games. So that's one thing I like. Phil Steele always puts like a turnover chart in his magazine about who was terrible with it last year and who was really good. It's rare that you have consecutive years of really bad or really good, because that stuff tends to even itself out. That's probably about all. I think we've hit on most of the pertinent stuff for this season. Thanks again for coming on. If people want to follow you, what are your socials, and what are the particulars about the podcast?
Yeah, you can find us anywhere on Apple, Spotify. Videos are up on YouTube. Always Talkin Ball podcast. Anywhere you find your podcast and your episodes. Social media, we're on every social media platform there is, either at Always Talkin Ball or on X at Always Talk Ball. My own personal X username is at Tyler_Nohe. We cover mostly the Power 4 conferences, but we throw some G5 love in there as well. And I try to consider myself, the G5 expert here of the podcast.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think more and more people, as the power conferences sort of consolidate and the big guys just sort of get bigger and bigger, and they kind of push some of the others down. I think more people are trending toward G5 football, and that's a good thing, because I'm not going to be naive and say that NIL and stuff like that doesn't get into the G5 level, but it's closer to the idea of college football, with the regionality and the stadiums being a little bit more intimate and all that. So I think a lot of people are trending toward G5, and I think you're going to see that in the next few years as the P4 continues to kind of be a runaway monolith, and we might even have just that 1 or 2 super conferences. So
right.
So certainly let's keep up the good fight, and keep doing what you guys are doing. Really enjoy your work, and we may try to touch base later on in the year.
For sure. Appreciate you having me on, Mike.
All right, no problem.